What is going on, YouTube people? Neo Cards and Comics here today. Talk about the National. Feels like we just left Chicago, but we are heading back. That is right. The much ballyhooed 2026 National that has been hotly debated since this past show a couple months ago of where it would be located. The votes have been tallied, and we are heading back to Chicago in 2026. So, for those keeping score at home, 2024 will be in my backyard in Cleveland, Ohio. 2025 back in Rosemont, aka Chicago. 2026 repeat back in Rosemont, aka Chicago. And then we are into the great unknown. No idea where 2027 will be going forward. Couple things to note here before everyone yells and screams in the comments down below about how come it is not coming to X city west of the Mississippi. I think something that people forget to keep in mind. The dealers are the ones that vote. So these 333 total ballots are voted on from the dealers that set up and sell. Not the corporate vendors, the dealers. Most of the dealers, I don't want to say all, and I don't know the percentage, but a large bulk of the dealers live on the East Coast / Northeast / Midwest. They are always going to vote for a city on the Eastern Seaboard or in that general area. Because, and I get it, it is a huge pain in the butt to haul all that inventory, booth setups, etc. across the country. If you're setting up as a dealer for the National, you cannot fly with all that stuff. That means you have to rent a truck and drive or have multiple vehicles or whatever. That gets costly. If the show is in Denver, Vegas, California, wherever, you're talking about multiple days drive, renting vehicles, gas, hotel rooms, extra expenses. That is why the National, unless something drastic would change, will never be west of the Mississippi. I just don't see it. It is what it is. It's an area of opportunity for other places to step up, like Burbank and whatever Fanatics does. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So this show is always going to be East Coast biased. It's the way that it is. It's the way that it will always be. I just do not see it changing. Is it a detriment to the show overall? Possibly. It doesn't seem to hurt attendance. They set records last year. So, a couple of key notes here. It is interesting that Atlantic City came in second place. Still lost by a decent margin, all things considered. Atlanta got absolutely crushed in this vote. Keep in mind, Atlantic City was essentially trying to buy the National and still lost. They were offering dealers, I believe, $1,000 cash, cold hard cash, to vote for Atlantic City, and it still lost. Now, there was rumors swirling about Atlantic City. I know I posted about it on Instagram leading up to this past year's show, where the Atlantic City Tourism Board had, basically put up the website saying, here comes the National in 2026. Oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. They backtracked on that. For Atlantic City to win, honestly, I think if Atlantic City would have won this vote, the Fix is In crowd would have been loud on this one. So next year we're in Cleveland. I've done tons of content around this. Anyone that follows the channel should know by now. Cleveland's going to be a little bit of a different National. No hotels across the street. You're going to have to Uber or drive in every single day. You're not going to be able to walk, most likely. It's going to be a little bit of a logistics nightmare. Everyone's going to be spread out. It is what it is. That's going to be next year's National. Then we're back in Chicago for 2 straight years. Say what you will about Chicago. This is in Rosemont, not even Chicago. From a layout perspective of the surrounding area, it is nearly perfect to host this show. There are tons of nice large hotels basically attached to the thing or directly across the street. There are tons of bars and restaurants in the surrounding area to grab dinner, host after hours things, the whole 9 yards. There's just a large infrastructure set up around supporting the show itself. Now, the one thing that I would like to see is the show floor itself improved. Obviously, we can make jokes about the air conditioning, but I am just talking about, can you please bring somebody in to lay out that show better. Last year's show, and when I'm talking about last year's, I'm talking about 2023, this past year's show, the layout just made no sense. There was people all in different corners, different corporate areas were split up. Breakers were in a whole nother spot. Just the show itself needs to be laid out better. It just has to be. If you need to utilize the upstairs space, whatever, you got to figure something out to lay this show out better. It just did not make sense last year at all. It felt like a maze. I know myself and others, it felt like you were lost. You had no bearings on where you were in that building, especially with those add-on sections, like over where TriStar was and stuff like that. So we were back to Chicago 2 straight years in a row. I'm not going to lie. I was kind of hoping for Atlanta, just for something a little different, to be quite honest. We will see where it goes after 2026. Nothing is listed after that. The new committee is in place. If they are going to stay Midwest/East Coast, essentially east to the Mississippi, and I don't know what the convention center space is like. I have to imagine it is pretty good. I personally would really like to see Nashville in play. I really like that city, selfishly. Just good food city, fun city to go to. And it's a city that would appeal to families going, because you could justify going for the weekend and say, hey, cool, we will do a day, or dad's going to go do a day or two at the National. Mom and the kids, there's plenty of stuff to keep them busy in town. Or, we could do a day out as a family, and then, I'm going to go into the card show for a day, and you take the kids to whatever. I think picking locations like that is important to kind of juice the attendance number. And I think Nashville would be a good city for that. The other obvious choice would be Orlando. I honestly don't think it would win because of the travel. Yes, it's East Coast, but remember, most of the dealers are Northeast, Midwest. So Chicago, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and then New York, New Jersey, etc. That is where I believe a bulk of the dealers live. That would be a hike to go down to Orlando. I wouldn't mind it. Orlando in the middle of the summer is not exactly the best place to be. But from I want to justify the trip and have other things to do, it would be interesting. I'm a big fan of Charlotte. The convention center is not big enough, unfortunately. I really like the convention center layout there. The area around it is perfectly fine. Good food city as well. Easy drive to get to if you're driving in. Plenty of flights, etc. But the convention center is just straight up not big enough for it. So the other place, which I don't think they would ever do this, it would be super expensive, but I think Fanatics events could potentially eye this one up, is the Javits Center in New York City. That is what hosts New York City Comic Con. I've been to that building once. I'll be going again here in about a month. Fantastic venue. Absolutely gorgeous. It is huge. It's New York City. There's a trillion things to do. It would obviously be extremely expensive. Room and board in New York City are insanely expensive. Getting in and out of the city, setting up, all that stuff would probably be a pain in the butt. I don't know that they would ever do it, but I would definitely think that it is on the radar for Fanatics events. New York City Comic Con is way bigger than the National, and that building handles it no problem. No problem at all. But Nashville would be my dark horse candidate for something that is probably realistic. Now, for the West Coast people screaming, how come we don't get these? How come we don't get the National? Will we ever get it? Why won't we get it? Listen, you guys are going to be taken care of by other stuff. Burbank is already carving out its niche as the West Coast National and kind of owning that and getting bigger and better every single time it runs. You also have the Dallas Card Show kind of owning that West Coast / Southwest section of the country. You have the Mint in Vegas. I understand that's more of an industry show than necessarily a card show, but Burbank and Dallas are the two things that you have. I would love to attend Burbank and Dallas. It's a pain in the butt for me, so I get it. That being said, I think Fanatics events will shake up this scene very soon. We don't know what exactly they're going to do yet or what they have planned, but you have to imagine they are eyeing up the West Coast as prime real estate, since the National tends to ignore it. I still think that I could see them partnering up or buying out Burbank and or Dallas and say, hey, we're going to take this show over, or maybe take over one of the Dallas shows and really, have Dallas do its quarterly thing or bi-monthly thing, whatever they do, and then take one of those and make it like a flagship show and move it maybe into Dallas proper at the main convention center or whatever they have going on down there versus out in Allen. I could see something like that happening. I could also see them partnering or buying out Rob from Burbank and kind of taking over that show and making that their big West Coast tentpole show. So if they wanted to, potentially, and they're going to do more than one show in a year, I have a feeling this is going to be a circuit. You could have Burbank kind of owning the West Coast as the tentpole show, Dallas owning the middle part of the country as their flagship show. And then if they wanted to do something East Coast, they could do New York City or somewhere else. Let's just call it New York City. And the reason I keep going back to Javits Center is because the guy behind Fanatics Events is the guy that built up and ran New York City Comic Con. So he's where that building, how it works, how it operates, the ins and outs of it. I could see them wanting to slide into that space and bring a big spotlight on cards and sports and pop culture and everything else that those things are going to be into NYC. So I could see that being their third show as like a tentpole East Coast show. And then you have the National kind of doing its thing. It's once a year thing. And then you still have the old school shows, your Philly show, your Chantilly, Hofstra, those sorts of shows are still always going to exist. Now, do we get show fatigue? That is something that we have talked about over the years as well. How many big shows can the hobby support? And which ones start to lose the buzz? A Philly, a Chantilly, that sort of thing. The National, I think those are always going to be your traditional, old school, I just want to go look and buy cards. I don't care for all the corporate pomp and circumstance, and maybe some autograph signers. I think the National is going to lean more that way, but obviously have its corporate presence because it's the National. I could see whatever Fanatics doing, trying to split the difference more about the pomp and circumstance and all the other side nonsense, which is not a bad thing. I enjoy that stuff. That's a big part of why I go to New York City Comic Con. The card show being, I don't want to say less of a focus, but not as much of a focus. More corporate pomp and circumstance, celebrating the hobby, autograph signers, events, panels, that sort of stuff, less dealers. So everyone's going to have their itch scratched. It's just a matter of, is there enough people around the country to support these flagship shows like this? And we don't know exactly what Fanatics Events is going to be doing yet. A lot of this is just me speculating on things. So National, back to Chicago in 2026. I'm not excited about it. I'm not excited about it. I am perfectly fine with it. It works out good. I have that plan down to a science by now, having been there twice. So no issues there. We'll see what happens going forward. Do we leave one of these cities in 2027? Does someone come out of the woodwork to grab this thing? Or, who knows what the show scene looks like by then? Fanatics Events will be in full swing by 2027. That could play a part in that as well. Like I said, my pocket pick, I'll throw Nashville out there for 2027 and lead that bandwagon just because I think it would be a fun city to have the National in. That's all I got for you, boys and girls. Catch you on the next one. Peace.